In this lesson, we'll be exploring how to define words based upon their Greek or Latin roots. If we were unable to define an unfamiliar word using context clues, which is the best way of defining a word in text, it's often possible to figure out what the word means based upon the word's etymology or morphology. You may be saying to yourself, what does etymology and morphology mean? These words are prime examples of where knowing a little Latin and Greek comes in handy. Let's use the word morphology for an example. Morpho is a Greek root word that means structure or form. Logi is a Latin root that means study of or knowledge of. When applying this meaning of each of the word parts to the word morphology, we can deduce that the word must mean the study of form or structure. Putting it into the context of my previous sentence, it must mean the study of form and structure of words. So why should we take the time to learn Greek and Latin word parts? Well, the English language has over 1 million words, and new words are being added to our vocabulary every year. Of those million or more words, approximately 60% of them were created from Latin or Greek. When you look at vocabulary words that we encounter in college, typically 3-syllable words or words that are found in science and technology, 90% of the words come from Latin or Greek. So, if a single Latin root can generate 5 to 20 English words, it's well worth our time in learning a few basics about both Latin and Greek. When looking at any word, it's important to understand the difference between a base word and a root word. A base word is a word that can stand on its own. Other words or word parts can be added to the base word to form a new word. For example, the word teach is a base word. It can stand on its own. But we can add things to the word teach to enhance it or change its meaning. These things that we add to the base word are called affixes, which are more commonly known as prefixes, which we add to the beginning of a word, or suffixes, which we add to the end of a word. For example, we can add the prefix re to teach to get the word reteach, or we can add the suffix ing to teach to get teaching. Root words are usually derived from an ancient language, such as Greek or Latin. A root is a word part that cannot stand by itself. It must be combined with another word part, such as a prefix, a suffix, or another root, to have meaning. Having an understanding of what a root word is and its affixes means what an affix meaning is can help us understand what a word means. We're going to spend the remainder of this lesson looking at specific combinations of root words and prefixes and suffixes. In English, we can have a word made out of all 3 word parts. It can have a prefix and a root, it can have a root and a suffix, it can have a prefix, root, and suffix, or any combination really. When we read an unfamiliar word that has an affix or a root, it's helpful to break the word apart by first looking at its root word. Once we've found the root word, we can look at whatever else it has. If it has a prefix, we can look at the prefix. If it has a suffix, we can look at the suffix. Or we can look at the prefix and the suffix if it has both. For example, if I were reading the following sentence, scientists have been baffled by the implications that the new discovery will have on their understanding of geology, from a fictional science article. Let's say I didn't know what the word geology meant. I would first look at the root of the word geology, which is geo. Now, I know that geo means earth because of other words that I know that have that same root, like geography. We now turn our attention to the suffix that is attached to our root, which in this case is logi. We know that that suffix has the meaning of study of or knowledge of from our knowledge of the word biology. So the word geology must mean knowledge of the earth. So whatever the scientists have discovered must be making them rethink their understanding of the earth. Let's practice with a few roots and affixes in different combinations now. The first one we'll work with is a word made up of a prefix and a root. So we're reading a text with the following sentence. Needless to say, her outspoken nature does not enamor her to the powers that be in the central government. Although there's some context clues, let's try to figure out what enamor means based upon just Greek and Latin. I start by finding my root word, which is amor. I know that root amor means, in Latin, love. Now let's look at the prefix. I know that the prefix en comes from both Latin and Greek and means within or to have in. So enamor must mean being in love or having love for. So in the context of my sentence, the woman being talked about must not be liked by the central government due to her outspoken nature. The next combination is a root and a suffix. Let's use the following sentence. Take your kids to the aquarium instead of shopping for the latest video games. First, we find the root word aqua, which I know means water. Then, we should look at the suffix, arium, which means a place associated with something, whatever it's attached to. So, I know that the word aquarium must mean a place where there's water. Now, from the context in the sentence, it must be something entertaining because you're going to take your kids there instead of going and having them play video games. Let's try another one. Sometimes a root will be made up of two roots, like in this example. Samuel Clemens was one of America's most celebrated authors. However, most people know him by the pseudonym he wrote under, Mark Twain. So we have two roots that we need to figure out. I look at the root pseudo, which I know means false. I look at the root nym, which I know means name. So I can deduce that the meaning of pseudonym must mean false name. Now let's try a word that has all three, a prefix, a root, and a suffix. So let's look at the sentence. History is a retrospective way of looking at life. First, let's find the root word, which is spect, which I know means to look or see from my knowledge of the word spectacle or spectacles, like our glasses. I then look at the prefix, retro, which I know means back or behind or past, from hearing the word used everywhere from fashion to engineering, like retro clothing or retro engineering. We now look at the suffix, iv, which I know means to have a quality of. So if I put that all together, I know the word retrospective must mean having the quality of looking back. So what do I do if my knowledge of roots and affixes is limited? What if I never learned many Greek or Latin roots? Well, unfortunately, there's no trick or fast way of acquiring this knowledge. The best way to learn roots and affixes is by reading and also by memorizing the most common roots or affixes. There are a number of free online resources you can use to help improve your basic knowledge of Greek and Latin roots. One of them is Quizlet.com. It has a couple of really great quizzes on it for prefixes, suffixes, and roots that you can take and practice to learn those meanings of various roots. Another great resource is StudyBlue.com. It also has excellent resources, and it's set up in a way that mimics flashcards so that you can actually practice flashcards of common Greek and Latin roots. Both of these websites allow you to practice and learn on either a computer or a phone or a tablet device. Now, if you don't have any of those and you just want to learn Greek and Latin roots, you can Google common Greek and Latin roots, and you'll find lists of the most common roots used in English. And that can be a good resource to study off of to just memorize various Greek and Latin roots. Having a basic working knowledge of Greek and Latin roots can really help you as you read to define large words or words that are very technical or scientific in nature. The best way of learning Greek and Latin words, Greek and Latin roots, and becoming familiar with them is to read a lot and to study them as part of your academic learning.